You know, we tend to think of history as this huge, sweeping story. But sometimes the entire future of a country can hinge on a single sentence debated on a single afternoon. So today, we're going to dive into one of those days, a day the U.S. Senate tried to pin down once and for all what it actually means to be an American. All right, let's set the scene. The date is May 30th, 1866. We're in the chamber of the United States Senate. The Civil War has just ended, but the country is still wrestling with some of its biggest, most fundamental questions. So if you looked at the Senate's agenda for that day, it would have seemed pretty normal, right? You've got a fortifications bill, a hospital bill, a tribute to a general who'd recently died. All pretty standard stuff. But hiding in plain sight, tucked right in there with all the routine business, was the real reason they were there, to decide who gets to be an American. And that's when Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan gets up to speak. He introduces what he thinks is a really simple, straightforward addition to the Constitution. It's meant to be a new first section for what would eventually become the 14th Amendment. And here it is, the big one. All persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, to Senator Howard, this wasn't some radical new idea. He just thought he was finally writing down what was already the law of the land. You know, just clearing up any doubt about who was a citizen. Yeah, he even said it himself. This has long been a great desideratum in the jurisprudence and legislation of this country. A desideratum, it's a fancy word for something that's really needed or wanted. So in his mind, he was just providing some much-needed clarity. But, well, that clarity turned out to be anything but simple. Because almost right away, the conversation didn't focus on who this clause included. Nope. It immediately flipped to who it might exclude. And that's when this simple idea started getting really, really complicated. Senator Doolittle from Wisconsin immediately jumps in. He wants to add just 3 little words, excluding Indians not taxed. See, he was worried that Howard's really broad language would just automatically make every Native American a U.S. citizen. But Howard pushes back hard. He says that change is totally unnecessary. In his view, Indians who are part of their tribes aren't born subject to U.S. jurisdiction anyway. He says they are regarded as being quasi-foreign nations. I mean, the U.S. makes treaties with tribes, right? And you don't make treaties with your own citizens. So, case closed. Or, so he thought. Because this is the moment the whole debate just explodes. Senator Edgar Cowan of Pennsylvania gets the floor, and he yanks the conversation way off course, away from the legal details and straight into this firestorm of anxiety about race and immigration. Cowan starts throwing out these really loaded questions. Is the child of the Chinese immigrant in California a citizen? And what about, in his own words, the child of a gypsy born in Pennsylvania? All of a sudden, this wasn't just about formerly enslaved people or Native Americans anymore. Now it was about everybody. And this quote right here, it just lays bare the fear that was driving his whole argument. He paints this picture of California being overrun by a flood of immigration of the Mongol race. He's basically asking if the people there are just supposed to sit back and watch it happen. The language is intense. It frames immigration as this massive existential threat. Then he pivots to a group he says is infesting his own state of Pennsylvania. The Romani people, or as he called them, gypsies. His accusations are wild. He says they own no allegiance, pay no taxes, don't serve in the military, that they're just trespassers engaged in a universal swindle. He's basically describing a group of people who he thinks live completely outside the rules of society, and he's terrified the 14th Amendment will protect them. But then, someone who actually knows what's going on in California stands up to speak. Senator John Conness. And he is armed not with fear, but with cold, hard facts from back home. A real dose of reality. So, Senator Cowan talked about a flood of immigrants. Senator Conness comes back with an actual number. He tells the Senate, look, there are about 40 to 45,000 Chinese residents in California right now. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of people for sure, but it's hardly the overwhelming invasion that Cowan was describing. And then Conness just starts systematically taking apart Cowan's argument, piece by piece. He points out, hey, most Chinese immigrants plan to go back to China, either alive or dead. He says very few bring their families over, so their population isn't exactly exploding. And far from being some kind of threat, he calls them docile, industrious people who are doing the backbreaking work of building the Pacific Railroad. But this is the most powerful part of his whole speech. He connects this abstract legal debate to actual life and death. He reminds the Senate that because Chinese immigrants couldn't testify against white people in California courts, the Chinese were robbed with impunity, they were robbed and plundered and murdered. He's making it crystal clear. When you deny a group of people legal standing, when you take away their voice, you're basically putting a target on their backs. This wasn't some academic exercise. It had brutal, real-world consequences. So, after all of that, what did we learn? Well, this whole debate, which started out as a simple attempt to define a word, actually ended up revealing just how many deep, unsettled questions were hiding right under the surface of what it means to be an American. And really, this is what it all comes down to. These are the huge conflicts they were fighting over on the Senate floor that day. Is being a citizen about where you're born, or is it about the culture you share? Who gets to decide, the states or the federal government? What's the real difference between a citizen and a subject? All these massive tensions just came pouring out. And you know what? We're still grappling with them today. So, for the record, the Senate did make a decision that day. They voted down that Indians Not Taxed amendment. They chose Senator Howard's original, broader, more inclusive language, the exact language that we have in the 14th Amendment right now. And that brings us to the big final question. On May 30th, 1866, the Senate tried to settle the definition of citizen with one simple, permanent sentence. So what do you think? Did they actually succeed? Or did they just accidentally prove that the question of who is truly an American can never really be settled at all?